What would you do if you heard a faint cry coming from behind a century-old wall? Would you think it's the wind, the pipes, a trick of your imagination? Or would you press your ear closer, just to make sure the sound you heard was real? That question haunted Michael Green, chief restoration architect of St. Dyer's Abbey in rural Maine, the night everything changed. It was late November, cold enough for his breath to fog the beam of his flashlight. The Abbey loomed over the pines like a sleeping relic, its Gothic arches cracked by decades of frost and neglect. Green had worked on dozens of historic buildings before, but nothing about St. Dyer's felt holy, felt watchful. The project had started as a routine government-funded restoration. The old convent was to be turned into a museum of early American Catholicism, a harmless bit of heritage work. But within weeks, strange things began happening. Workers complained of whispers in the basement. Equipment failed for no reason. And more than once, someone swore they heard knocking behind the eastern wall. 3 sharp taps, then silence. On the evening of November 12, 2023, Green descended into the lowest sub-basement with 2 crew members to check the foundation. The air grew colder with each step, thick with the smell of wet stone and iron. The only light came from their flashlights, trembling against the ancient bricks. Then they heard it, a sound too soft to be mechanical, too rhythmic to be random, like breathing. Green froze. "Did you hear that?" The others nodded, wide-eyed. He raised his hand, signaling for silence. The sound came again, muffled, drawn out, almost like someone crying through a mouth full of dust. "Could be a hollow space," one of the men said, trying to sound rational. Green lifted his hammer and tapped the wall. The echo came back wrong, deep, resonant. Hollow indeed. They began removing the outer layer of brick. As soon as the first slab came loose, a wave of air rushed out, stale and foul, reeking of rot and copper. One of the men gagged. The beam of Green's flashlight cut into the darkness beyond the opening and caught something pale. At first, he thought it was plaster. Then the light shifted and he saw teeth. Behind the wall lay a chamber barely large enough for a small room. The floor was dirt, not stone, and on it bones. Piles of them, human, some tangled together as if the bodies had fallen clutching each other. Others smaller, infant-sized. A rosary, still wrapped around a withered wrist. Shreds of linen veils. Fragments of wooden crosses. And there, resting on the chest of a half-buried skeleton, a small metal medallion gleamed dully in the beam. 2 serpents coiled around each other, biting their own tails. Green whispered, almost to himself, "Oh, God!" But in that moment, in the stillness after the discovery, something answered. A faint sound came from inside the wall, a soft, uneven breath, followed by a single word impossible to mistake. "Mother!" Green stumbled backward. The flashlight slipped from his hand and clattered to the ground, its light rolling across the room like a restless eye. For a heartbeat, he could have sworn he saw a shadow bend toward him from the darkness beyond the bricks. Then everything went silent again. By the next morning, St. Dyer's Abbey was no longer a restoration site. It was a crime scene. Police tape fluttered between the pine trees as state troopers and forensic teams moved in and out of the ancient building. What had started as a minor architectural project had just become one of the largest forensic investigations in Maine's history. Michael Green, still pale from the discovery, stood beside the lead medical examiner, Dr. Karen Whitfield. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and precise, a woman who never used words she didn't need. Green watched as she crouched near the gaping hole in the wall, her gloved hands tracing the edge of the ancient mortar. "Multiple bodies," she murmured, voice muffled behind her mask. "At least 50 visible from this angle, maybe more underneath." Any idea how old? Green asked. Whitfield shook her head. Judging by the condition, over a century. Late 1800s, early 1900s. But the preservation is strange. These people weren't buried. They were sealed. As more of the chamber was excavated, the true horror unfolded. Rows of skeletons pressed together as if frozen in a final struggle. Many still bore remnants of fabric, white linen habits, rosary beads, fragments of metal crosses, and almost all of them were female. That same afternoon, the local university dispatched Professor Aaron Bell, an expert in religious history. He arrived with a leather satchel full of books and an energy that contrasted sharply with the silence around him. Bell knelt beside the remains, adjusting his glasses. Nun habits, he said softly. Early 20th century. This was no random grave. He turned toward Green and Whitfield. Whatever happened here, it was sanctioned, at least by someone inside. The initial reports came back 2 days later. The number of victims was between 80 and 90, all women aged roughly 17 to 30. Then came the finding that froze even the hardened forensic team. Almost all of them had been pregnant at the time of death. Dr. Whitfield's voice trembled slightly as she read the results aloud in the temporary field tent. Pelvic deformation, spinal stress, fetal bone fragments. These women were in advanced pregnancy stages. Many gave birth shortly before death. Bell closed his notebook. So they were mothers, or meant to be, Whitfield replied quietly. On the third day, while documenting the chamber, Green's assistant noticed something wedged deep inside a crack near the foundation. A small, water-stained notebook, wrapped in rotting cloth. The pages were brittle, but the ink had survived. On the first page, barely legible in elegant handwriting, was a name, Mary Doyle, and below it, a date, March 3, 1907. Bell carefully turned the page. The first lines were written in a neat, nervous script. They say we must pray at midnight now. Only those chosen by Mother Seraphine may attend. The others stay in their cells. I can hear the singing through the floorboards. It sounds like mourning, not worship. The team exchanged glances. Who's Mother Seraphine? Green asked. Bell's expression darkened. That name's not in any Abbey record I've seen. Whitfield looked back at the open hole in the wall. Maybe she didn't want to be found. Outside, the wind rose, whistling through the broken stained glass. It carried a low, hollow note, almost like a chant, soft, rhythmic, and very far away. For the first time, even the seasoned historian felt it. The weight of something ancient, waiting beneath the stones. The notebook was fragile, its spine nearly dissolved, but the words inside were alive. Sharp, intimate, trembling with fear that hadn't faded in more than a century. Dyer. Whitfield read the first entries aloud as Professor Bell translated the faded script into typed notes. March 6, 1907. My name is Mary Doyle. I am 19 years old. I came here from Boston after the sisters found me wandering the docks. They said St. Dyer's Abbey would be a place of peace, a home for women who have lost their way. I believed them. The first night, the gates closed behind me with a sound like chains. Mary described her arrival in vivid detail. The long corridors that smelled of wax and damp stone, the constant ringing of bells, and the rule of silence that began at dusk and lasted until dawn. Each novice was given a cell with no window, a single candle, and a crucifix carved from bone. Letters were forbidden. Speaking without permission was punished with isolation in the chapel. Confession was not made to a priest, but to Mother Seraphine herself. March 12th. We must confess our dreams to her now. She says the devil hides in what we see when we sleep. When I told her I dreamed of the sea, she smiled and said the ocean is a liar. It promises freedom, then drowns you. She made me kneel for an hour and repeat, "Silence is salvation." The tone of the diary shifted after that. The handwriting became less steady, more frantic. March 20th. Cannot sleep. The sisters walk at night. I hear their bare feet on the stone, a line of them moving toward the chapel. No candles, no prayers, just whispering. Sometimes I count them as they pass my door. There are always fewer when they return. One entry caught everyone's attention. The ink had bled as if the writer's hand was shaking. March 27th. Agnes is gone. She was with child. Mother Seraphine said she was called below. We are told never to ask where below is. But last night, I pressed my ear to the chapel floor and heard something. A low humming, like many voices under the ground. I think they are still singing. Professor Bell paused reading, his throat tightening. She's describing an underground chamber, he said quietly. It matches the structure beneath the east wing. Whitfield nodded, her eyes fixed on the faded ink. She's documenting the disappearances. The next entry was dated just days before the Abbey's official closure in 1907. April 2nd. Tonight it is my turn. Mother Seraphine says I have been chosen for the third prayer. She says I will be cleansed and reborn. I am afraid. The others who were chosen never came back, but we are told they are still with us, in spirit, in the blood, in the child of light. I can hear something growing under the chapel floor. It moves when we sing. It listens when we pray. Asterisk. The final lines filled an entire page, scrawled in thick, uneven ink. No one returns after the third prayer. No one. And when the candles go out, I hear it breathing. It sounds like the earth itself is alive and hungry. When Whitfield closed the notebook, the silence in the room felt heavy, almost alive. Outside, a storm was rising over the Maine coastline. The sound of thunder rolled through the Abbey's hollow halls. But for a moment, just a moment, it didn't sound like thunder at all. It sounded like something moving beneath the chapel floor. The excavation beneath the Abbey took 3 days. By the fourth morning, the team had exposed a narrow staircase buried under a century of debris, leading down into darkness. The air that rose from below was colder than the November wind outside, dry, metallic, and still carrying the faint scent of incense. Dr. Whitfield led the descent, flashlight trembling in her hand. Michael Green followed, with 2 archaeologists behind him, recording every step. The stone walls were carved with strange marks, spirals, interlocking circles, and something that looked disturbingly like a serpent consuming itself. At the bottom, the passage opened into a small underground chapel. The walls were blackened by candle smoke, the ceiling low enough to make them crouch. In the center stood a stone altar, carved not with crosses, but with twisting, alien symbols. "Not Christian," Professor Bell whispered. He brushed away a layer of dust and froze. The carvings formed a repeating pattern, snakes coiled around a chalice. Dr. Whitfield knelt by the altar's base. Her gloved fingers traced a dark stain that spread outward across the stone floor. "It's not paint," she murmured. "It's blood, and it seeped deep into the rock." The team exchanged glances, the silence between them broken only by the distant dripping of water. Bell examined the altar side and found faint etchings in Latin. So faded he had to use a UV lamp to read them. He frowned. "It says Mater Sanguinis, the mother of blood." Later that evening, in the temporary field office, Bell cross-checked the name in diocesan archives. The Abbey, he found, had been officially closed in 1907 due to a supposed epidemic among the sisters. But there were no medical records, no physician reports, no burials listed. Only one brief note in the bishop's correspondence. "Seal the grounds. "Do not open the crypt. The prayers have failed." Back underground, one of the workers shouted. The security camera caught it, the flash of something moving at the far end of the corridor. A shape, pale and slender, like a woman in a white habit, standing motionless in the dark. When the lights flickered back on, the corridor was empty, but the footage showed it clearly. As the camera refocused, a shadow lingered behind the altar, moving when no one else did. Professor Aaron Bell spent the next several nights buried in the diocesan archives, chasing a name that the church seemed eager to forget. The further he dug, the more he realized how little of St. Dyer's history had survived untouched. Records were missing, pages torn out, entire ledgers marked, sealed by order of the bishop. But then, hidden in a collection of private correspondence between the abbey and local benefactors, he found them, letters dated 1905 to 1907, written in elegant cursive and signed simply, Mother Seraphine. The letters were addressed to several prominent industrialists of the era, men whose families still owned half the lumber mills of northern Maine. Each note thanked the recipient for their generous contribution toward the work of the holy vessels. One letter, dated June 1906, contained a single chilling line: "The vessels have been chosen. Their blood will feed the womb of the mother, and through it the land shall be cleansed." Bell read the sentence aloud in the temporary field office. Dr. Whitfield stared at him. "Vessels? As in women?" He nodded grimly. "Likely the nuns, or the pregnant girls Mary wrote about." Another letter mentioned the 9th prayer, promising that the first harvest will be complete before winter's end. Bell cross-referenced the dates, each one aligned with a recorded disappearance from the abbey. The industrialists' donations spiked after each ceremony. What the hell were they funding? Green muttered, pacing. Bell answered without looking up. A cult, and not a new one. Over the following days, the team traced the abbey's foundations through old survey maps. They discovered that the building stood atop an earlier site, one far older than colonial settlement. The local Wabanaki tribes had once revered this land as sacred ground, a place of offerings to a fertility spirit named Matoka, often depicted as a woman with serpents for hair and a crown of roots. According to oral legends Bell uncovered, Matoka demanded blood for renewal, usually that of mothers or unborn children. When European missionaries arrived in the 1700s, they condemned the practice as devil worship and built a wooden chapel on the ruins, hoping to sanctify the ground. A century later, St. Dyer's Abbey rose in its place. Mother Seraphine didn't create a cult, Bell said quietly as the team gathered around the old maps. She inherited one. She simply gave it a Christian face. Whitfield frowned. "You mean she tried to merge them?" "Exactly. She replaced the tribal goddess with the Virgin. The offerings stayed the same, but the prayers changed language." Late that night, Bell sat alone in the chapel's remains, reading the last of Seraphine's letters. One line stood out, the ink darker than the rest, as if written in haste or rage. "The church turned its face away, but she has not. The mother sleeps beneath the cross, and she will rise when the 10th vessel is full." A faint sound broke the silence, a soft scrape from the far wall. Bell turned, thinking it was one of the crew, but the hall was empty. The air had turned heavy again, carrying that metallic scent from below. Somewhere under the stone, something shifted, like breath through the earth. The next pages of Mary Doyle's journal were different. The handwriting had grown tighter, smaller, as if she'd been writing in the dark, trying not to be heard. The ink was faded brown now, the smell of mildew clinging to the paper. But the words were unmistakably desperate. April 5th, 1907. They have taken all the expecting sisters to the East Wing. Mother Seraphine calls it the Hall of the Blessed. We are not to speak to the others anymore. She says we must purify ourselves for the ceremony of the 9th. We sleep during the day now and wake when the bells ring at midnight. The chapel glows red at night. I do not know from where the light comes. Asterisk. Professor Bell and Dr. Whitfield read the entry aloud to the small group gathered in the field tent. The generator hummed softly behind them, but even that mechanical sound seemed to falter as the words filled the air. The following entries descended further into madness or faith. It was hard to tell which. April 9th. We are no longer called novices. We are the Hollow Sisters. Mother says our bodies must be emptied so that the true light can enter. She anoints us with ash and oil mixed with blood from the lambs they keep below the chapel. But when I touched the bowl, the blood was warm, too warm. She said it was the mother's gift. Asterisk. April 10th. There are 9 chalices on the altar now, each carved from bone. Mother Seraphine wears a crown made from the same. She says when the 9th cup is filled, the veil will open, and the new children will come through it. Agnes is here again, or what's left of her. She doesn't speak. She just hums that same hymn, the one we heard before they walled up the south corridor. Asterisk. Dr. Whitfield closed her eyes as Bell read, her face pale in the lamplight. 9 chalices, she whispered. 9 vessels. 9 mothers. Bell nodded. It's a fertility ritual, but inverted. They weren't giving life. They were offering it. The next entry had been written in uneven lines, the pen digging into the paper so hard that it tore through the sheet in places. April 14th. The floor shakes at night. We think it's the sea beneath us, but there is no sea. The walls pulse when the bells ring. Some of the sisters say they can hear their children calling from the ground. Mother Seraphine says the mother is near. She says we must not be afraid when the walls close. Asterisk. The last entry was brief. Only one sentence, scrawled across the page in a trembling hand, followed by a dark streak where the ink bled outward. Tonight we heard them sealing the wall again, but this time they are inside with us. When Bell finished reading, the wind outside the tent howled through the pines like a cry. The generator flickered once, then steadied. No one spoke. Dr. Whitfield closed the notebook gently, her gloves stained with dust and something darker. Mary wasn't just writing, she said quietly. She was warning us. From somewhere deep within the Abbey ruins came a sound, 3 slow knocks, echoing through the empty corridors. The same rhythm the workers had heard weeks before. 3 knocks, then silence. When the excavation team cleared the last section of the sealed chamber, they expected only more bones, more dust, more silence. But in the far corner, where the walls met at a sharp angle, there was something different. A figure. Unlike the others, this one hadn't collapsed or decayed into a pile of scattered bones. She was sitting upright, her spine pressed against the stone, her head bowed slightly as if in prayer. The light from the workers' lamps hit her face and revealed what remained of parchment-like skin, stretched thin over bone. Her mouth was open mid-chant or mid-scream. Dr. Whitfield knelt beside the body. The woman's hands were clasped together around a rosary made of blackened beads fused by time. But what drew everyone's attention was the object on her skull. A crown of sorts, tarnished but intact, made of a strange dark metal that shimmered blue under the light. Michael Green whispered, "That's the one we found near the altar." Whitfield nodded. It wasn't left there. It was hers. The bones were brittle, but the skull itself looked wrong, elongated, the cranial ridges distorted as if the bone had grown unevenly over time. There were traces of scar tissue fossilized into the surface. It was almost as if her skull had changed shape after death, or because of what killed her. Whitfield's voice broke the silence. These deformations, I've never seen anything like them. Professor Bell was already setting up his camera, documenting every angle. Could it be ritual modification? She shook her head. Not like this. It's biological. Something happened to her, something that altered her from the inside. Samples from the crown were sent to the lab that same night. The preliminary report came back within hours. The metal contained compounds not found in any known alloy, traces of an isotope that shouldn't exist outside of meteorite composition. Even more disturbing were the DNA results. Within the tissue fragments embedded in the crown, they found genetic markers that were human, mostly. But several sequences didn't match anything in the database. Whitfield read the report twice before saying it aloud. Either this is contamination, or she wasn't entirely human. Professor Bell stared at the skeletal figure. Mother Seraphine, he murmured, or whatever she became. That night, the team set up additional lighting and cameras in the lower chapel. But the equipment began to fail almost immediately. Batteries drained in minutes. Video feeds flickered with static, distorting into black lines and whispers of sound that seemed to form words. Half in English, half in Latin. Mater vigilat. The mother watches. At exactly 3:13 a.m., every monitor in the command tent lit up at once. The feed from camera 2, the one aimed at the altar, showed the far corner of the chamber. The seated woman was still there, but for 3 full seconds she moved. Her head lifted slightly, her mouth closed, and the crown, once dull, glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then the screen went black. When power returned, the chamber was empty. Only the crown remained, lying on the floor, turned upside down, as if it had been placed there deliberately. The discovery of the crowned woman should have closed the investigation. Instead, it opened another door, one that led far beyond Maine. While reviewing church archives in Washington, Professor Bell was granted temporary access to declassified FBI files from 1927. He expected bureaucratic noise, nothing more. But deep within the stack, a name surfaced that made his hands tremble. Elizabeth Dyer. According to the file, Dyer had founded a small religious community in rural Pennsylvania known as the Sisters of the New Light. The description of the woman was chillingly familiar. Tall, gaunt, eyes described as pale gray with a faint golden hue. Witnesses claimed her voice could bend silence. Bell flipped to the attached photograph. The image was grainy, but the resemblance was unmistakable. Mother Seraphine, reborn under another name. The file detailed a string of disappearances across several towns along the Delaware River, mostly infants and young mothers. The press at the time called it the Cradle Murders. Locals whispered that the sisters were performing cleansing rites, casting the babies into the river wrapped in linen shrouds marked with 2 intertwined serpents. Federal agents raided the compound in late October 1927. They found the chapel empty, the altar overturned, candles still burning. Elizabeth Dyer was arrested on charges of ritual murder but vanished from custody 3 days later during transfer to Philadelphia. The case was quietly closed. One of the last pages in the file contained a short note from the lead investigator, handwritten in the margin. The cult did not die, changed its skin. Back in the present, Bell sat alone in his office, the old file spread open before him. Outside, the rain lashed against the windows. He reached for his mug and froze. An envelope lay on his desk. No postage, no return address. The paper smelled faintly of ash. Inside was a single card embossed with a sigil. 2 serpents intertwined, biting each other's tails. Below it, written in precise red ink, "She remembers you, Aaron." The lights flickered once. Somewhere behind him, a chair creaked, though he was certain he was alone. Bell slowly turned toward the dark window. For a split second, in the reflection, He thought he saw a woman in a black veil standing behind him, watching. Then the room was empty again. By winter, the investigation had reached its final phase. 89 bodies had been recovered from the sealed chamber beneath St. Dyer's Abbey. 89 women. But Professor Bell's notes and Mary Doyle's diary spoke of 10 chosen vessels. The numbers didn't match. Dr. Karen Whitfield spent several nights rechecking the forensic database, convinced the missing body had been misplaced or destroyed by time. But every record, every bone, every DNA trace confirmed the same truth. One woman was never found. Then, in the State Archives of Bangor, she uncovered a faded hospital log dated May 1907. The same month, the Abbey was officially closed. The entry was brief and written in hurried script. Unidentified female, approximate 20 years of age, arrived from St. Dyer's Convent. Extreme hemorrhage, unresponsive. Child delivered with severe deformities. Subject expired at 3:42 a.m. Body removed by sister of the mother. There was no burial record, no certificate of death. Only one cryptic line added in pencil at the bottom. Infant retained for observation. Eyes did not close. Whitfield read the page over and over. The ink was smudged, as if someone had tried to erase the last words but stopped halfway. When she showed the record to Bell, he said quietly, "The 10th vessel wasn't sealed inside the wall. She escaped or was taken." That night, Whitfield dreamed of water. Black water rising through the chapel floor. In her dream, she stood in the east wing, her reflection breaking apart in the puddles between the stones. Behind her, something whispered her name, not as a question, but as recognition. For the next week, she worked alone, staying late in the makeshift lab at the site. The crew said she'd stopped sleeping. One technician claimed to hear her talking to someone when the power went out, though the cameras showed her alone. Then came the noises. At first it was just dripping, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Then came the crying. Faint at first, muffled by stone, like an infant behind a wall. She told Bell about it over the phone. "It's in the east wing," she said. "I can hear it when everything else is quiet." "Karen, leave the site," he urged. But she didn't. On December 2nd, the night watch found the lab door open. The lights inside flickered, equipment still running. Whitfield's coat was draped over her chair, her notebook open to a page filled with symbols, the same intertwined serpents drawn in red marker over and over again. Her laptop recorded one final video 7 seconds long. The frame showed her standing near the excavation pit, whispering something too faint to understand. Behind her, in the darkness, two faint reflections, like eyes, glimmered for an instant before the feed cut out. Whitfield was never found. When the search team packed up the next morning, Bell noticed something on her desk, a small object half buried under papers and dust. He lifted it carefully into the light. A metal medallion, dark and cold, engraved with two serpents entwined, biting their own tails. At the back, in tiny engraved script, were two words barely visible under the tarnish. 10th vessel. A year later, St. Dyer's Abbey reopened, not as a convent, but as a museum. The headlines called it a memorial to the lost sisters. The state framed it as a story of tragedy and faith, a warning from another century. Tourists arrived by the busload to walk through the restored corridors, to stare at glass cases filled with rosaries, letters, and fragments of scorched stone. No one mentioned the 10th vessel. No one spoke of the crown, or the blood that still stained the altar floor beneath the new tiles. The museum's curator, a young journalist named Clara Monroe, was assigned to create a short documentary about the Abbey's history. She spent her days interviewing locals, recording the scripted narration about the dark legacy of St. Dyer's. But what drew her most wasn't the exhibits. It was the silence that filled the building after sunset. On quiet nights, when the lights were off and the visitors gone, the Abbey seemed to breathe. The air grew heavy and cool, like the pause before a storm. Sometimes Clara thought she heard footsteps from the east wing, slow, deliberate, echoing across the empty stone floors. The staff dismissed it as the building settling. But then came the other sounds. Faint crying, rhythmic tapping from behind the walls, a woman's voice murmuring in Latin. Mater vigilat, the mother watches. Security footage from October 12, 2024 showed the museum empty after closing. At 2:47 a.m., camera 3, facing the east corridor, flickered. For 6 seconds, a figure appeared at the far end of the hall. A woman in a black habit, motionless, head slightly bowed. As the seconds passed, she moved toward the wall, the same section once sealed with 90 bodies. The motion sensors didn't register her presence. The temperature monitor dropped by 6 degrees. She raised one pale hand and touched the wall. The footage went white for a moment, then cleared. Cracks had appeared along the plaster, spreading, branching, as if something beneath it was pushing out. The camera feed cut to static. The next morning, security found nothing unusual except for a faint mark on the wall where the cracks had been. The outline of a hand pressed into the surface, darker than paint, darker than blood. When investigators enhanced the footage, one final frame emerged, a still image before the system failed completely. The woman was looking directly into the lens, her lips parted as if whispering. No sound survived. Only a line of subtitle from Clara's unfinished documentary, left in her editing file the next day. Some prayers never die. Some walls never keep them in.